Welcome to the Talking Shop podcast, where I'm here to share stories, lessons, and experiences in sports performance and professional development. I'm your host, Matt Tometz, and in this episode, I'm going to take you through my 3 on-campus interviews at colleges, universities to share my stories and experiences to help you better prepare and crush your next on-campus interview and just interviewing in general. So let's do it. So just courtesy, I will not be disclosing any names, universities, whatever, just to be polite, respect them. These are just my experiences and the types of roles that I was interviewing for. Although I believe interviews are more similar than dissimilar, I was interviewing for strength and conditioning roles at the college level. And these typically also had a sports science role or influence or some sort of number piece to it. There was a school in the Pac-12, a school in the Big Ten, as well as a Division II school. So, just on campus interviews in general, if you find yourself in the interview process being invited on site on campus, because this could apply to anything really like this, it's probably the final step of the interview process. I would be surprised if there's something else beyond that actual on campus day. So it's usually the top 2 to 4 candidates. The Pac-12 school, it was top 4. The Big Ten school, it was top 2. I think that the G2 school is top 2 as well. And they like you for XYZ reasons. Chances are if they're going to pay to fly you, pay to put you up in a hotel, pay you to travel for your time, they already like you. You've made it through 2 or 3 previous rounds. And they said, hey, we're going to invest to really see if this is our guy or girl. So this is an example of an itinerary that you would get. And there's a lot of blanked out parts of the screen, like I said, just to be respectful of just the other people on the other side, but very, very detailed itinerary of what your day is going to look like. Literally from when someone called me in my hotel room at 8 a.m. until I hopped in the Uber to go back to the airport at 2:45 p.m. Every 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, whatever is mapped out when you're walking where, who you're talking to, where it's happening, who's going to walk you from one place to the next. So these are just 2 examples. Here's another one of just what a day looks like and also what they should be giving you your itinerary of an on-campus interview. So you can see the different types of roles that you'll talk with. These meetings are typically 30 to 45 minutes, with the longer ones, the more important ones at the end of the day, when you're kind of brain fried, being like an hour. As well as being creative. Like I said, someone called me at the hotel. This itinerary had 2 Zooms on it. And if you're listening, not on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, this video version of this podcast is on YouTube. Please check it out, subscribe. I do my solo podcasts on YouTube because I make little PowerPoints with visuals to it as well. So with the itinerary, if they don't give you one, you should ask for it. Hey, is there a game plan for when I come to campus? Do you have an itinerary prepared, et cetera, et cetera? Because there's so many moving pieces on the other end, coordinating who's free when. They have to talk to you at certain times. They have to fit everything in this relatively tight window. Chances are that there is an itinerary because they have to be so precise with everyone's time and making it all happen. And your whole day is planned out, literally who, what, when, and where. So all these people are also very well versed and prepared kind of in your background. Why they brought you onto campus is to see you live, to get more people involved in this interview process that you would be dealing with on a daily, weekly basis, right? So they're not going to be asking you, actually, they might, I'll get there. But, anyways, these people know who you are, right? You're some stranger that they're flying across the country, they're paying to drive, they're putting up in a hotel. They're not just going to set those other people up on campus up for failure, right? They're going to set them up for success to maximize your time and their time to get the best interview opinion version of you for their feedback to help them make the hiring process. And there's usually one person leading the way, one person taking lead of walking to different places, coordinating, texting with people. So also you could ask, but hey, is there someone who's mainly going to be leading my day, et cetera, et cetera? I think that's a valid question as well. But if you don't have an itinerary, if they don't give you one, ask for one. So game plan. It was so funny after the second one, and especially after the third one. I literally thought to myself, I was like, wow, I just relived the same day 3 times. Now, of course, it's not obviously carbon copy one day of the next, but as you saw, the two itineraries, those looked super, super similar, right? So if you get when you get an itinerary, you'll know who you're talking to. Chances are it's going to be an athletic trainer, a sport coach, physical therapist, the S&C staff, the director, someone in HR, someone in the athletic director role department thing. And after the second one, as I was in the Uber to the hotel to fly home, I literally just thought I had the same conversation 8 times throughout the course of the day. And here are the 3 questions that were the consistency of those 8 same conversations with 8 different people. Why are you trying to leave your current role? Why this role specifically? And why are you different? And knowing that these questions are going to come up, these are, simple interview questions. And although everyone on campus is going to be familiar with your background, they're going to give you they're going to give that person a little briefing of you. Well, they want to know firsthand. They want to hear your answers. They're not going to recite word for word your 2 or 3 interviews before. They're just going to give you a quick kind of rundown. So if you know that you're going to be asked these questions, then you have a chance to prepare clear and concise answers. So I'll share my answers, for example. So why are you trying to leave your current role? So trying to leave the private side. I miss the consistency, the community, and the clarity of the college side, which is kind of why I'm trying to go into a college role specifically. But the joke is if I see an athlete twice a week for 6 weeks, that's a very consistent athlete. So my athletes are in and out all the time. Everyone is on such different pages in regards to their career, their goals, what they want to get out of training. And it's valuable for me to be adaptable and meet an athlete where they're at and try to manage that. But it's just so clear in the college side when keep the athletes on the field. And the community of the team is also what I miss. My current role, my athletes are all over the place. It's usually one-on-one, maybe a group of 2 or 3. So that's kind of both those answers together, but I was able to kind of compare and contrast. And then why am I different? I have to be an entrepreneur and lead myself every day in my role, in my career development, and my coaching with my athletes and clients, as well as my experience of being a college athlete. So I can speak that language of the athletes. I have experience actually coaching, so I can talk with the sport coaches. And I have experience as a sports scientist, so I can speak the numbers as well as understand what it's like being an athlete and understand what it's like being a practitioner, what it's like trying to do what you love to do and what you're qualified to do and why you're there with everyone on the staff as well. And of course, that was just quickly off the top of my head. I'd rehearse those a little bit better, but dial in those 3 questions and answers. Next, so if you have the itinerary, everyone who you're going to talk to, when and where, well, you can plan how you want each interaction to go. I got this advice from my mentor where he said, well, how do you want, what do you want the feel to be? How do you want them to summarize it to the director afterwards? You can set yourself up for success by working backwards. And when it came time to literally write out how I wanted each one to go, what I wanted the experience to be, it was like, well, what are all these people really concerned about? And basically, whether it's the athletic trainer, the sport coach, the other strength staff, it's like they're just concerned that I'm easy to get along with and I don't make their jobs harder. That I'm a value add, that I make their lives easier actually, and that I'm not enjoyable to be around. So how do I get that across where I'm here to work with them, not against them, and I'm fun to be around? And then based on their role / background, because you have their job title, what do you think that they're going to ask you? That's totally valid to try to game plan and say, oh, well, if I'm chatting with an athletic trainer and I'm interviewing for this strength and conditioning coach role, well, what questions are they possibly going to ask me? Or if you have someone who, let's say, is in an athletic department in that admin officey role, we'll ask them, like, when you guys interview strength coaches, what do you ask those people? Because it's valuable to have specific stories and anecdotes of those things. So when I chat with sport nutritionists, I always reference a few stories of when I was in the college side working with the nutritionist, and same thing with the athletic trainer, some of the successes that we've had, kind of collaborating and working together. And consequently, why I'm excited to work with an athletic trainer again, because I don't have one in the private side. So see how you can bring all of these answers together, what's lacking, where I'm currently at, why I'm excited to get to this potential role, how some of my past experiences give me this relatively unique insight. And stories just go so much further and they're more memorable. And instead of just speaking on theory, what you would do, what makes sense, what you learned in a textbook, you're saying, no, like this is real life. I know that there is this theory that makes perfect sense, but that's not real world. This is applied. I've been there, done that. So next, the chalk talk, because believe it or not, you're interviewing to do a specific technical job. But I was definitely surprised at how much or lack thereof of like the super technical questions there was anyways. But when you're game planning these interactions, you're going to chat with sport coaches. Well, you could guess that they're going to ask, hey, how do you work with baseball athletes? How do you work with swimming athletes? How do you work with tennis athletes? How would you differentiate working with guy athletes versus female athletes? You can guess all of these things and have those answers kind of tentatively prepared, not to map out the whole interaction, but think about the job you're interviewing for, what they're really concerned about, and then meet them in the middle. It's not really rocket science. The S&C staff, well, they're probably going to ask you something about programs, something about exercise selection, something about how do you handle, trouble athletes that are giving you some issues, stuff like that. So the chalk talks definitely were an underwhelmingly not big part of the day, but there were bits and pieces of it kind of throughout. So you can be prepared with who you're going to talk to and guess what they're going to find valuable and have those specific things. But definitely was not as technical as I thought. But you are being interviewed for that, so you should be prepared. So plot twist: don't look at the screen. If you had to guess what percent of the day was small talk, just asking about their background, asking me about my background, asking what it's like living in that city or town, whatever it may be. If you had to guess what percent of the day basically was not super specific chalk talk, what percent would you guess? Well, it was like 85%, 80, 90, whatever. If there was 10 questions that were asked, probably 2 or 3 of them might have been super, super specific, as opposed to like, how is the drive in? Like, is it your busy season at work right now? Like all this stuff. And consequently, if you know that, well, now you know because you listen to this podcast, that a lot of it's going to be small talk and you know who you're going to talk to. Well, there's this thing called the internet, right? So it's not to say that you have to map out, and this is the point of this podcast is just to give you a real life picture and not surprise you when you get there, right? But you make it yourself. You put your own spin on my stories and experiences. Research them beforehand, right? I think I would be very flattered if someone was interviewing at TC Boost and we're just walking around the facility, just, small talking, and they go, oh, I saw that you have a podcast, you're 140 episodes in, what's that process been like? Like, that's a super cool, casual, but like insightful question that they cared to take the time, and maybe not. I see you have 3 kids, they're each 2 years apart. One of them just had a birthday and they're also an Aquarius, like that's a little bit too far. You know what I'm trying to say? The most recent one I had, I saw that they wrote a book. So I asked them what that process was like, like make it personable, show that you took the time, but you're also not a stalker. Everything is a fine line kind of on a continuum. And it's not to script out the whole conversation, but at least it helps you kind of ask questions and if you know that you want to talk about something, or maybe you have a common connection point that you've learned about, maybe they've been on a few other podcasts or whatever, you guys have this in common, well, you can ask them about A, which then gets you to talk about B, which then you get to ask them C question, which then leads you to really talk to D that you want to get to, but you can't just bring that up right away. So use it to your advantage and just be prepared beforehand. Just like do your due diligence like you would if you were a professional doing your actual job. So the meeting with the director at the end, this 1 hour, 45-minute conversation that they totally wait until you're totally toast because you've been talking all day, answering the same 3 questions over and over and over again. I can honestly say that each 3 of these conversations at the end with the director of, these were both Olympic S&C jobs, with the director of Olympic sports, or at the D2 school as just director of strength and conditioning, each 3 were different. And I'd like to share kind of each one. So the first one was that chalk talk. He and I walked in the conference room. He closed the door. He pulled 4 expo markers out of his pocket and said, "Every training foundation of yours, go." And I just picked up a marker, started talking about strength training, different markers, started talking about speed training, different marker, started bringing it all together. And then he said, "Oh, well, you have this sport, this athlete, they're in this off season. All right, how do you do these 12 weeks of January to whatever?" I would say that was probably the most technical one that I had, but definitely an interesting moment where you're just like, "Oh, okay, I guess we're going in now." There was the second one, where the director and I were in a conference room, closed the door, and he said, "I'd love to hear your opinions about the day. Do you have any reservations about the job?" And it was really just more like reflecting than like interviewing, kind of really just trying to get my live 2 cents on everything. That was definitely a more interesting one. Definitely threw me off guard, but that was an opportunity to then ask those like kind of real questions as well. Um, just as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So I asked, because both of these directors at the Pac-12 and Big Ten school, I really liked. I think I would have enjoyed working for them. I said, as much as you care to share, how long do you plan on being here? I really would like working for you. I've liked interacting with you so far. And I know that the director is a big part of this. It can make or break, an associate's time or job at a college. And they both said that they really liked what they're currently at, and they don't really have any plans to leave, as they both had families. But also come prepare with questions for that person as well. And last, the most recent one was an interview, but it was about intangibles. So they kind of went through all of their core values, the like 7 that they had, and asked how I would embody those things and personify those things and make those things come to life, as well as like, how do you deal with professionalism? And kind of, it was an interview, but it wasn't a chalk talk. And then there was also time for us to have that kind of back and forth conversation as well. So knowing that you are going to have that talk specifically with that director for so long, you should probably have some questions as well. But this might be a conversation for a different podcast, but the directors don't always get to hire who they want. We'll see if that came through. The directors don't always get to hire who they want. And that's a conversation for a different day. So the biggest takeaways, if you're having on-campus interview, first, get that itinerary if you can. Second, get really good at answering those 3 questions. So why are you trying to leave your current role? Why this role specifically at this place? And why are you different / like, why should we hire you? As clearly and concisely answer those questions. Not robotically, but if you know your main beats, if you know your main 2 or 3 bullet points for each one of those questions, well, it makes it answering a lot easier than coming up with it out of like thin air in the moment. Do your research for small talk. You literally know who, when, how long, and where you are talking to everyone for the 6 hours of your day that is mapped out. Set yourself up for success, right? And it's not to be robotic. I've said that a few times, right? But if there's a lull in conversation, you're just like, how about the weather today, right? well, you have that cool nugget that you get to ask them about, that they get to talk about themselves, because people love talking about it. It's their favorite thing to talk about, right? So set yourself up for success by doing a little bit of research for that small talk, kind of when it, if not if, when it comes up. Be ready to talk a lot, but be yourself. It was it was funny when I flew out to that Pac-12 school, the Uber to the hotel, I was very talkative and all this stuff and XYZ. And then the Uber going back, I didn't say more than like 10 words. My brain was so fried. I was just, talking all day. I was like on my game, but trying to like be chill, so be ready to talk a lot. you know, Feel free to ask for bathroom breaks and water breaks, and they're probably going to be offering you water throughout the day, and you'll have breakfast, lunch, a meal or two. But just be ready to talk a lot. Believe it or not, they're there to talk and interview you. So be ready. And outline each interaction, how you would like it to go, what you think that they're concerned about, what questions they might be asking you about, that kind of bring both of your job/roles together, and have specific examples, or have a little Rolodex of answers that you have for specific questions. And even if those questions, if you don't get asked some of those specifically, and there's certain stories and anecdotes that you have and like, and you think just show your experience and your expertise, well, also you're just creating a super cool Rolodex of all these stories, lessons, and experiences that you have. So I think it would be super valuable to write out stories you love telling, write out questions you might be asked, write out super cool moments from work that you don't want to forget, that are on the top of your mind, and then see kind of where those things align. And it's not to say that like every one of those will get asked, but instead of spending 10 seconds looking up in the sky being like, oh man, have I worked with a nutritionist before? Well, chances are you probably have. They're going to fly you across the country. So take the time beforehand to rattle your brain a little bit, to text people in current roles that are similar, athletic trainers, people in the athletic department, whatever it may be. Ask them what questions they would ask someone interviewing for your role. And then like, just, it's not verbatim, write it out sentence for sentence, word for word, but know your main beats, know your bullet points, know what you want to get across ish, and then just let it happen in real life. So those are my stories, lessons, and experiences from my on-campus interviews. Good luck.